briefly explain to our viewers why you think Keir Starmer is a fraud.
This is a politician who has adopted explicit political strategy of misdirection and dishonesty.
You break down the ways that you were targeted for your efforts to investigate some of these people.
There's an attempt to discover some angle or some dirt.
All right, buckle up, folks, because today we're diving headfirst into the murky waters of British politics, specifically the Labour Party and a man named Keir Starmer. You know, the guy who promised the moon, the stars, and a free pint for everyone, then apparently decided a stale cracker was good enough? We're going to break down some truly wild claims about political maneuvering, alleged dishonesty, and how a party seemingly veered hard right after promising to stay left. It's a tale as old as time, politicians saying one thing to get elected, then doing another. But this, my friends, takes the cake, the whole bakery, and maybe even the delivery truck. So, grab your popcorn, because this isn't just about British politics. It's a masterclass in how political power can be sought, seized, and some might argue corrupted. Let's get into it.
It could be used against me to discredit my reporting.
When Keir Starmer became the leader of the UK's Labour Party, he claimed to be the heir of Jeremy Corbyn. He pledged to abolish the House of Lords, eliminate university tuition fees, and nationalise water and energy. But over a year into his premiership, Starmer has proudly and loudly abandoned much of that left-wing platform in favour of turning the party to the right, a move that has landed him deeply underwater in the polls and made him one of the most unpopular prime ministers in British history.
Did you catch that? Proudly and loudly abandoned much of that left-wing platform. I mean, you gotta give him credit for the proudly part, right? Most politicians at least try to hide their flip-flops under a trench coat. Starmer's out here doing it in a neon pink Speedo, shouting, "Look at me, I'm abandoning everything I said I would do." It's like ordering a gourmet 5-course meal, and when it arrives, it's a lukewarm hot dog on a paper plate. And then the chef looks at you and says, "Yeah, I changed my mind. This is better for you." Better for who? Exactly? Certainly not the folks who voted for the gourmet meal. This isn't just about a change of heart, it's about a complete ideological U-turn. He rode in on the coattails of Jeremy Corbyn, promising a radical transformation, an eco-socialist paradise, and then, poof, it all disappeared faster than your motivation on a Monday morning. It's the political equivalent of a bait and switch, but on a national scale. And let's be real, this isn't some minor policy tweak. We're talking about fundamental planks of a political platform, abolishing the House of Lords, free university tuition, nationalizing essential services. These aren't suggestions. These are foundational promises that rallied a specific base. When a politician does this, it doesn't just erode trust in that individual. It erodes trust in the entire political system. It makes people cynical, and for good reason. Why should anyone believe what a candidate says when they've demonstrated such a willingness to discard their core tenets once power is secured? It's a classic move. Appeal to the idealists, capture their energy, and then pivot to the perceived center once you're in charge, hoping everyone just forgets what you said initially. But voters aren't goldfish, folks. We remember. And the polls, as the speaker notes, reflect that memory. Being deeply underwater, and one of the most unpopular prime ministers in British history, isn't just a bad day at the office. It's a consequence of what many see as political betrayal. This whole situation highlights a critical issue in modern politics, the increasing disconnect between what's promised during campaigns and what's delivered in office. It's a game of strategic misdirection, and unfortunately, the voters are often the ones who pay the price, left wondering what, if anything, they can truly believe.
So, who is Sir Keir Starmer, and what does he really stand for? And how much power and influence does his top advisor, Morgan McSweeney, really have? The new book is seeking to answer that question while also uncovering how a faction of pro-Israel, corporate-aligned centrists took over a left-leaning Labour Party. The book is called The Fraud, Keir Starmer, Morgan McSweeney and the Crisis of British Democracy. It's available now, and joining me today is the book's author, Paul Holden. Paul, thanks so much for coming on Mehdi Unfiltered.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with the title you chose for this book, The Fraud. I understand that you lay out this conspiracy, what is basically a conspiracy, not a conspiracy theory, but a conspiracy to take over the party. It involves a large cast of characters. The book is wide-reaching. Just briefly explain to our viewers why you think Keir Starmer is a fraud, and tell us about some of the people who are involved in that fraud.
Sure. I use the word very explicitly to refer to the fact that this is a politician who has adopted, alongside his political allies, a explicit political strategy of misdirection and dishonesty in order to win political power. And he did that over a period of time, first to become Labour leader in April 2020, when he ran as a radical left-wing eco-socialist who's going to transform the country, and then did the exact opposite. That is an explicitly adopted strategy, effectively come up for him by his advisor at the time, who was the chief of strategy on his Labour leadership campaign, a man by the name of Morgan McSweeney, who is now the chief of staff to Keir Starmer and who is now widely recognized as the most powerful unelected person in British politics. This entire project that was run between mid-2017 and 2020 to destroy the Labour Party under Corbyn and then install Keir Starmer was pursued via a particular vehicle. It was called Labour Together, which was a very anodyne-seeming think tank in the public domain, very boring-seeming, actually, which was pretending to try and unite the party while actually facilitating the secret project.
Okay, hold up. So we've got a think tank, Labor Together, that's supposed to be uniting the party, but it's secretly facilitating a project to destroy it, funded by a hedge fund manager and a pro-Israel funder. And then, when an author uncovers that these donations weren't declared, which is, illegal, this same think tank hires a reputation management firm to investigate him? That's not just shady. That's a scene straight out of a political thriller. It's like finding out the local bake sale, advertised as raising money for puppies, was actually funded by a shadowy conglomerate trying to corner the market on artisanal sourdough. And then, when you ask questions, they send a private investigator to dig through your trash. The audacity, the sheer, unmitigated gall. This isn't about forgetting to declare donations. When you're talking about close to £1 million, that's not pocket change you misplace under the sofa cushions. That's a deliberate, calculated decision. And the immediate reaction isn't to rectify the error. It's to silence the messenger. That tells you everything you need to know about their intentions and their priorities. This tactic, using reputation management firms to dig up dirt on critics, is a chilling reminder of how power can be wielded to suppress inconvenient truths. It's not about transparency or accountability. It's about control and intimidation. They're not interested in addressing the allegations. They're interested in discrediting the person making them. It's the classic ad hominem attack, but with a budget. And the fact that these same people are now very influential in the UK government should send shivers down anyone's spine. If this is how they operate to gain power, what does that say about how they'll operate with power? It suggests a willingness to operate outside the bounds of ethical conduct and, in this case, even the law, to achieve their political ends. This isn't just a political scandal, it's a fundamental challenge to the integrity of democratic processes. When donations are undeclared and whistleblowers are targeted, it undermines the very foundations of trust that a healthy democracy relies upon. It paints a picture of a political machine that is less concerned with public service and more concerned with self-preservation and the ruthless pursuit of power, no matter the cost.
And during that entire period of time, it was funded with close to £1 million in donations, primarily from two sources. One, a very wealthy hedge fund manager called Martin Taylor, and another from a guy called Sir Trevor Chin, who is a very well-known funder of pro-Israeli causes. But none of that money was declared at the time to the Electoral Commission as required by law, which is plainly unlawful, plainly illegal. And actually, Labour Together were found guilty of that fact. And the documents I took to the Sunday Times spoke to that story and raised the question, well, were these donations simply forgotten about, or was it possible that these donations weren't reported purposefully? I think that if you look at the sum total of the evidence, including the fact that they are undertaking a multiple-year-long campaign of misdirection, this evidence was these donations are not being reported, possibly purposefully. Immediately after that, Labour Together, this think tank, which is now very influential in the UK government, hired a reputation management firm, which then set out to investigate everything about me, who my family were, who my professional contacts were, And I was very lucky. I had no idea this was happening, but effectively, I was contacted by well-known journalists, a very well-regarded international investigative journalist, saying, we're investigating the ways in which reputation management firms and private investigators in the UK are used to go after whistleblowers and journalists, and your name has come up in that investigation. And they started sharing these reports with me, showing the extent to which my life had been dragged through. It's reading through that material. There's an attempt to discover some angle or some dirt that could be used against me to discredit my reporting. I have had some experience of that because I've done quite high-level investigative work in South Africa, where I'm from, but it was still quite shocking to find out that these people who were on the cusp of power at the time, and now really are at the heart of power in the UK government, were doing that.
Let's talk about Labour Together, the think tank you mentioned that's now very close to the heart of government. In the book, you suggest that, quote, Labour Together's most consequential intervention was to insert itself into the high-profile Labour Party anti-Semitism crisis during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. You call the group's role profound, wide-ranging, at times despicable. What do you mean by that? What did they do? Because a lot of people will say, well, I was told that Jeremy Corbyn was an anti-Semite and there was a massive anti-Semitism crisis. Are you saying it wasn't real? What role did this group play?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to do is to start at first principles. And I take my cue from a man by the name of Martin Ford KC. Martin Ford KC was brought into the Labour Party in 2020 to investigate allegations of racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia in the party. And he investigated it for 2.5 years and brought out this very sober, very thought-through report alongside a series of commissioners. His reading, which I think is the right one, was that there was anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but it had been snarled up in this vicious factional war between the sort of the Corbynite left-wing faction of the Labour Party and the right-wing faction of the Labour Party. And what he meant by that was that on the right of the Labour Party, the anti-Semitism crisis could have been seen and sometimes was used for politically advantageous reasons to undermine the credibility of the Corbyn leadership and to sap the whole movement of the hopeful spirit that had carried along for so long. What we didn't know at the time, and I think it's really problematic that we didn't know, is that Labour Together was very deeply involved in that crisis. In particular, Morgan McSweeney, as leading light at Labour Together, his allies, a guy called Steve Reed, who is now the Minister for Housing and is very powerful in the current government, and a man by the name of Imran Ahmed, who I think is quite influential in the States now through an organization called the Centre for Countering Digital Hate. And they were doing multiple different things. Primarily, they were working very closely with the media behind the scenes, entirely undisclosed, to seed a whole series of stories about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And I went back and looked at those stories. And in most instances, or certainly quite a few of the instances, they take an extremely alarmist tone to the nature of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And they quite frequently make allegations that left-wing Jewish people are making anti-Semitic statements and use them as examples of anti-Semitic conduct in the Labour Party.
Let me ask you, Paul,
because
if Morgan McSweeney is doing this stuff, he's allegedly, him and his group are allegedly seeding stories, pushing a political partisan agenda to undermine Jeremy Corbyn. At that time, Keir Starmer is in the shadow cabinet. Keir Starmer is a loyal lieutenant to Jeremy Corbyn, saying he will make a great prime minister. Does Keir Starmer know what's going on? Is he involved in this from your investigation?
It's not clear. It's not clear that he knows at the time. I think it'd be extremely hard for him not to know now, seeing as it's been written about relatively extensively. It's not just myself. I've written this book, which explores it from the most critical perspective. But there's been 2 other books that have addressed the fact that Morgan McSweeney was involved in this stuff.
Reported on leaked documents from the Labour Party, which revealed that the spokesperson for Labour Against Anti-Semitism, Ewan Phillips, who is not Jewish, had apparently created a fake Jewish-sounding pseudonym, David Goldstein, which was used to make hundreds of complaints of anti-Semitism to Labour Party between 2017 and 2020. And as you say, against actual Jewish people in the Labour Party.
Wait. Let me get this straight. A spokesperson for a group called Labour Against Anti-Semitism, a group that was treated as very credible, allegedly created a fake Jewish pseudonym to file hundreds of anti-Semitism complaints against actual Jewish people in the Labour Party? And this all happened between 2017 and 2020, during the Corbyn years? This isn't just disturbing. This is a nuclear-level political dirty trick. This isn't just a random weird dude. This is an organized, cynical, and deeply malicious campaign. It's weaponizing a serious issue like anti-Semitism for political gain, turning it into a cudgel to bludgeon opponents within their own party. It's the ultimate betrayal, not just of political principles, but of basic human decency. Imagine the outrage, the justified outrage, if a right-wing group had done something even remotely similar. The headlines would be screaming, and rightly so. But here we have what sounds like a calculated internal sabotage operation, using a fake identity to smear political rivals, including Jewish members, with one of the most serious accusations imaginable. This isn't just about undermining Corbyn. It's about creating an atmosphere of fear and suspicion where anyone on the wrong side of the factional divide could be targeted. It's a textbook example of character assassination, designed to delegitimize an entire movement and its supporters. And the fact that some of the people involved are now in powerful positions in the UK government is beyond alarming. It's a chilling reminder that in the cutthroat world of politics, some will stop at nothing. They will twist facts, invent narratives, and even weaponize identity to achieve their goals. This kind of behavior doesn't just damage a political party, it poisons the well of public discourse and undermines the very idea of honest debate. And the story of Riva Jaffe, an elderly Jewish woman accused of antisemitism on her deathbed for calling Israel an apartheid state, and her family's pleas to Keir Starmer going unanswered, that's not just cruel, that's a profound moral failure. It speaks to a callousness, a lack of empathy, that is truly terrifying in those who seek to govern. It's a stain that won't easily wash away, and it raises serious questions about the integrity and character of those now at the helm.
Yes, it's one of the more disturbing stories, I think, that we came across. And the importance of the story is not just that he's this random weird dude who's done an extremely weird thing. First of all, he's the spokesperson for this group called Labour Against Anti-Semitism, which during the anti-Semitism crisis was treated as this very credible organization, that all of its allegations were well-founded and needed to be taken very seriously. Second, Labour Against Anti-Semitism is very powerful and important in amplifying some of the secret projects that Morgan McSweeney and his colleagues were launching at the time, primarily aimed at demonetizing left-wing media outlets that they considered a threat to them. And yes, you're right. I was astonished when I looked through the Labour Party files and I searched the name David Goldstein. People who were left-wing and who were Jewish were accused of anti-Semitism. One of the most disturbing stories I tell in the book is about a woman by the name of Riva Jaffe.
Yes.
Now, Riva Jaffe, I actually know. She lives locally to me. She also was close to a new Keir Starmer, who was in the same constituency Labour Party as her. In 2021, she is quite unwell and nearing her deathbed, and she gets this email from the Labour Party, and it says, "You're under investigation for anti-Semitism." And the evidence is primarily that she's called Israel an apartheid state. And she has to answer this claim of anti-Semitism on her deathbed. It's literally one of the last things she does. She writes this incredibly moving letter to the Labour Party in response saying, "What are you thinking? You've gone mad to accuse me of something like this. This doesn't make any sense. Why do you find me, this elderly Jewish woman, to be so threatening?" Now, this story about Riva Jaffe, and this is the last thing she does before she dies. And the disturbing thing is that her family then write to Keir Starmer, repeatedly her son, and say, our mother died under the allegation of anti-Semitism. Please, can you clear her name? Can you please just tell us that you've closed this investigation? They've never responded to him, not once.
Wow, that is truly
it's
cruel,
terrifying.
as you say in the book.
David Goldstein was the person who submitted.
Paul, considering that some of the people involved in pushing this anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party included Morgan McSweeney, and they are now in powerful positions in the UK government, how would you say that campaign in opposition paved the way for Labour in government to continue facilitating the genocide in Gaza?
I mean, I think it's really profound. You can't really understand the Labour Party's response to what the ICJ calls a plausible genocide in Gaza without understanding this background. Fundamentally, the anti-Semitism crisis was used by a political faction to win a battle for control of the Labour Party, a battle that they couldn't necessarily have won democratically. When people see the real them, they are not very popular, people like Morgan McSweeney and their politics. The anti-Semitism crisis that it did a number of things, one of which was effectively make it almost impossible to have a robust criticism of Israel in the Labour Party. Most people became terrified, saying, for example, that Israel's an apartheid state, that Israel must conduct itself in Gaza and the West Bank. And immediately after October 7th happens, that fear of speaking out against Israel really dominates proceedings. And you can see in the initial instance, it's completely constrained where the Labour Party can find itself in relation to Israel, which effectively means that it cannot criticize Israel to any sort of meaningful degree. The first instinct after October 7th is to say that Israel has the right to shut off water, electricity, and food to Gaza, which it plainly doesn't.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned the popularity. We're almost a year and a half into Keir Starmer's premiership. His approval ratings are in the gutter. Last question. I spoke to a Labour MP recently who said Starmer will be gone after the local elections next year. Do you agree with that? And what comes after Starmer?
It's very hard to know. I would put my money on Starmer going after May elections. The current polling suggests a real wipeout for the Labour Party in places like Wales and Scotland. I mean, there's a seat called Caerphilly in Wales, where they had a by-election recently, a seat the Labour Party's held at a constituency level for 100 years. This is one of the safest possible seats in the entire country. And they just lost it to the Welsh Nationalist Party, Plaid Cymru, in a Senate by-election. And I think that's going to prompt his dismissal. I think it's going to be a leadership coup. And I don't know what's going to come thereafter, because basically it's going to be this real battle for the soul of the Labour Party. Is it going to be Morgan McSweeney and his allies in this sort of right-wing faction, people like Shabana Mahmood, who's now the Home Secretary, and has pushed the Labour Party so far right on asylum and immigration issues? Or is there going to be a sort of a soft left revival around people like Andy Burnham or Angela Rayner? For me, I think this is existential. I think if that right-wing faction like Shabana Mahmood, Wes Streeting, all these people who have been associated with Morgan McSweeney for a long time, the Labour Party is in a death spiral because all they need to do is to copy the far right, and this is going to be anathema to Labour Party supporters. If there's a different leader, there is a small chance, and it is a small chance, that the 5 years of damage this faction has done to the party, scaring away half its membership, totally replacing its bureaucracy, handpicking its MPs, can slowly be unraveled to turn it into something that actually reflects a Labour Party that we recognise as a force for progressive change and good in the country.
Well said. The book is called The Fraud, Keir Starmer, Morgan McSweeney and the Crisis of British Democracy.
Wow. If that doesn't paint a picture of political machinations and alleged corruption, I don't know what does. From abandoned promises to undeclared donations and alleged smear campaigns using fake identities, it sounds like the Labour Party has been a hotbed of controversy under Keir Starmer's rise. This isn't just about left versus right. It's about the very integrity of our political institutions and the trust we place in those who seek power. When the tactics are this ruthless, it makes you wonder what other truths are lurking in the shadows. What do you think? Is this just typical political hardball, or does it cross a line into outright fraud and manipulation? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown insightful, do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the world of politics. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep asking the tough questions.
Paul Holden, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.